Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Ethos Online. Again, this is a space where we can be, belong, and become the very best version of ourselves. So, again, wherever you're joining us, we just want to say thank you for traveling with us through these really epic narratives. Right? We call it the Bible. We look at these stories, these warnings, these elements of what does it mean to be a human. All of this we look at it together. We ask the deeper questions. We look at what does the author mean, right? Who is the audience? What did that original language actually mean? Since Hebrew is not our language, most of us, right? We ask the difficult questions, and we take the Bible responsibly. And so every week we pour resources into this. We spend hours just attempting to find out what the original intention and meaning was. And then after we do, we attempt to find some interesting application for today. And so most of the time, it's really interesting applications we can find. Other times, we think, it's close, right? This is a concept maybe you could pull from it. We're a little flexible in that. But we're always asking, what is the deeper meaning? And so, again, we have been moving through, for some of us joining us today, we've been moving through this book of Genesis. And again, a lot of people will view this book from this historical lens as if it is simply a history book with specific dates and specific times and literal names and numbers. And the truth is, when we approach the Bible that way, especially Torah, right? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. When we approach it that way, we actually miss out on deep, deep meaning. The meaning that the actual audience who wrote this and received it during that era, we miss the deeper meaning from it, the actual applicable one. And so again, reminder, 587 BC, the reason they write Torah in the first place was not so they could recount history. The deeper reason was so that they would have their identity and their values to hold on to so that they did not assimilate to Babylonian Empire. That was the whole point. We don't want our tribe's livelihood, its lifeblood. We don't want it to end here in Babylon. And so we write in response to the fears of assimilation. And that was the main reason. Right? And so when we approach it, we look for the values, the rituals, the traditions. We look for that when we read through it. We look, where is Israel represented in the story? And almost always what you'll find when we do it is you're going to find Israel in every character, in every scenario. You're going to find captivity, themes of captivity over and over and over, because that is what they were really concerned with. Right? How do we survive captivity? How do we come out of this with some kind of lifeblood, some kind of tribe still intact? Right? How do we save our future generations? How do we keep Jewishness kosher? Right? All of this is what's going through their minds. So today, we're going to move through some heavy lifting. We're going to do some heavy lifting. But the reason for it, of course, reading verses 15 all the way through 57, is that there are repeated elements in this telling. All right? So verses 1 through 14 in chapter 41, basically the tellings of the dream happen. What's going to happen again is you're going to experience the retelling of the dreams. Joseph is going to say, yep, you dreamed this dream. And again, the idea here, he is confirming that he knows the dream. And so much of this we've already interpreted, so we kind of skip over. But I remind you, and we'll read it together, of course, but I'll remind you, the idea here is threefold, right? Joseph has a dream, twofold, right? Then the baker and the cupbearer, they have their dreams. And then Pharaoh has two dreams. So again, in Jewish culture, to what's holding it all together, the divine, right? And so this was the picture. The menorah is in almost every metaphorical picture. It's a way that they write. It's a writing device. And so these dreams they build, right? We go from just Joseph to now his world expands. And then all of a sudden now it's the entire empire. So the story gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so we view it this way. It's a writing strategy Jews use even in the book of Revelation. You'll find that over and over again. So there's purposeful devices, literary devices being used here. Did it literally happen or not? Not really an interesting question anymore. The real question is, what did it mean for the people then? How do I apply it to today? That's the deeper question. So, reminder again, the story of Joseph, not just a story about some kid with an interesting coat. It is the story of Israel. And so, reminder here, I like this picture. Pharaoh is scanning the Nile, right? His empire, he's looking at his empire and he's looking to see what is the lifeblood, where are we heading, right? So the dreams, again, are a response to him surveying his empire, the health of his empire. Where are we? Where are we heading? What's the longevity of my empire, right? What's the legacy I'm going to leave? Those are the questions empires ask, right? And so he's asking the deeper questions of his empire. So I'm going to do the heavy lifting. I'm going to read with you, and then let's delve in and interpret some of this. So here we go. Verse 15, we'll start there. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter for it, but I have heard it said of you, you understand a dream to interpret it. Joseph replied to Pharaoh, saying, Not I, God will give an answer that will bring peace to Pharaoh. And again, notice that, bring peace to Pharaoh. 17, and Pharaoh said to Joseph, In my dream, behold, I was standing at the bank of a Nile. And behold, 7 cows of robust flesh and handsome form were ascending from the Nile, and they pastured in the marshland. And behold, 7 other cows were ascending after them, emaciated and very ugly, and with meager flesh. I have not seen such ugly ones throughout the entire land of Egypt. And the meager and ugly cows devoured the 7 healthy cows, and they went inside of them, but it was not known that they had gone inside of them, for their appearance was as ugly as the beginning. Then I awoke. Then I saw in my dream, and behold, 7 ears of grain were growing on one stalk, full and good. And behold, 7 ears of grain, hardened thin and beaten by the east winds, were growing up after them. And the thin ears of grain swallowed up the 7 good ones. I told the necromancers, but no one tells me its meaning. And Joseph said to Pharaoh, Pharaoh's dream is one, what God is doing, he has told Pharaoh. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears of grain are 7 years. It is one dream. And the 7 meager and the ugly cows coming up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty ears of grain beaten by the east wind will be 7 years of famine. It is this matter that I have spoken to Pharaoh. What God is about to do, he has shown Pharaoh. Behold, 7 years are coming, great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. And the 7 years of famine will arise after them. And all the plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine will destroy the land. And the plenty will not be known because of the famine to follow, for it will be very severe. And concerning the repetition of the dream to Pharaoh twice, that is because the matter is ready to emanate from God, and God is hastening to execute it. So now let Pharaoh seek out an understanding and wise man and appoint him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this and appoint officials over the land and prepare the land for Egypt during the 7 years of plenty. And let them collect all the food of these coming good years. Let them gather the grain under Pharaoh's hand, food in the cities, and keep it. Thus the food will remain as a reserve for the land for the 7 years of famine, which will be in the land of Egypt, so that the land will not be destroyed by the famine. The matter pleased Pharaoh and all his servants. So Pharaoh said to his servants, We will find anyone like this, a man in whom there is the Spirit of God? Basically, who are we going to find that fits this mold? Pharaoh said to Joseph, Since God has let you know all of this, there is no one as understanding and wise as you. You shall be appointed over my household, and through your command all my people shall be nourished. Only with the throne will I be greater than you. Right? So Pharaoh said to Joseph, Look, I've appointed you over the entire land of Egypt. Pharaoh removed his ring from his hand, placed it on Joseph's hand, and he attired him with raiment of fine linen, and he placed the golden chain around his neck. This is a big deal. And he had him ride in his chariot of second rank, and they called out before him, This is the king's patron, appointing him over the entire land of Egypt. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and besides you, no one may lift his hand or his foot in this entire land of Egypt. Pharaoh named Joseph Zaphenath Paneah, and he gave him Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, the governor of On, for a wife, and Joseph went forth over the land of Egypt. I did okay not butchering those, didn't I? Verse 46, Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from before Pharaoh and passed through the entire land of Egypt. He's surveying, right? And in the 7 years of plenty, the inhabitants of the land gathered food by handfuls. And he collected all the food of the 7 years that was in the land of Egypt, and he placed food in the cities, and the food of the fields surrounded by the city he put within it. And Joseph gathered grain like the sand of the sea in great abundance until one stopped counting, because there was no number. And to Joseph were born 2 sons before the year of famine set in. Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, the governor of On, bore to him. And Joseph named his first son Manasseh, for God has caused me to forget all of my toil in all my father's house. And then verse 2, or 52, and the second name, Ephraim. God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. The 7 years of plenty that were in the land of Egypt were finished. The 7 years of famine began, as Joseph had said, and there was famine in all the lands. But throughout the land of Egypt, there was bread. Great story, right? There's so many rich implications here. And so I'm just going to bring some of these up to you. But again, I know it's a long reading. So let's delve in. So many good things here. First off, when you read this, notice this. Verse 15. Did I skip something? Yeah, we're gonna keep moving. I'll get to verse 57 and all of that. But verse 15, look at this here. Notice this. You understand a dream and interpret it. That is to Joseph. Pharaoh's saying, you understand the dream. The word here for understand, it means you listen and you understand fully. So a Pharaoh going to Joseph and saying this is a really kind of idea here. Joseph is able to do something that even Pharaoh and his people can't. So when you are an empire and you are the greater empire and all these smaller tribes are lesser, to say that would be pretty surprising for any empire. Any Jewish person reading this smiles a bit, right? Because the idea here is we Jews, Israel, we have something to offer that empires need. Yeah, empires don't like to hear that. They hold the power. They hold the control. They hold the goods, the resources, all of it. But they need Israel. What does Israel feel they have that empire lacks? That's the question that anyone reading this would have been considering, especially if you're a Pharaoh. What could these people possibly offer me in my empire that I don't already have? That's the key picture here, right? What does empire need that Judaism has? And we'll get there. So, verse 16. Joseph replied to Pharaoh, look, not I, God is going to answer. So again, interesting here. The wisdom is not mine, right? And this is how Judaism often considered Torah, right? Torah was a gift. They didn't earn it. They didn't just come by it by accident. They believed it was a divine gift. It's wisdom. And so wisdom is going to be the thing that's going to carry our people out of hardship, out of captivity. It's going to be the thing that is going to be the gift to these empires. It's not the only thing. There's more. But interesting, humility here. He says, look, I'm going to offer you peace, right? I'm going to give an answer that's going to bring peace, shalom, nothing missing, nothing broken to Pharaoh. I'm going to give you the gift. It reminds me here of Proverbs. Shalom even to our enemies. Shalom even to our enemies. Right now in our culture, we have probably some of the most divisive language being used in all areas of politics. Right? There's so much divisiveness. People are they're arguing there's civil war coming, right? And it's not just America. We look at all over the globe. There is so much divisiveness happening right now. And we don't often say we wish our enemies well, do we? You will not hear a Trump supporter or a Biden supporter say, you know what? Even though we agree on policies, we wish you well. We hope that in your time in charge, we hope the country prospers. You won't hear that from either side. And you won't find that in any country, really, when these two differing perspectives disagree. They won't look for peace, will they? But it's interesting here. Israel says, look, our Lord, our God, the divine, is going to bring peace to you, right? Proverbs 16:7, when the Lord takes pleasure in anyone's way, again, how you're living, the way in which you move through life, right? He causes even their enemies to make peace with them. There is a peace that comes from it. There's a connection. Anywhere they go, they're going to bring peace, shalom. There's going to be connection. It's such an interesting idea, which is exactly what Joseph going into Egypt didn't bring more divisiveness. He didn't go there to break down the culture. He didn't go there to make Egypt great again, whether you're a Biden or Trump supporter or whatever. Both narratives they follow. He didn't go there to do that. He went there and he asked, how can I be a blessing, right? How can I move through this and bring both my people and my captors peace, shalom? It's such a refreshing narrative, especially for right now. Verse 19, and behold, 7 other cows were ascending after them, emaciated and of very ugly form and with meager flesh. I have not seen such an ugly one throughout the entire land of Egypt. This to me struck me because, again, Pharaoh has never known hardship, right? This Pharaoh has never known despair, right? And so he's going to learn from Israel. Yeah, Israel has been through it, right? They've been through this. He's going to learn from Israel. When we have been through something, we often have wisdom to share. I will oftentimes hear really young people, and I'm not saying it's because they're young that they lack wisdom, because sometimes they have wisdom. But often we share before our experience is over, right? We overshare before we've gone through the thing. Israel has gone through the thing, right? They have gone through captivity. They've gone through hardship. And it's fascinating at this moment, Egypt is asking Israel, how do you get through hardship? How do you get through despair, right? In a historical level here, it's an interesting idea that an empire that's about to experience difficulty would turn to one of its captor tribes who they've known has gone through pain, difficulty, captivity over and over and over again. They turn to that tribe and they say, hey, you have some wisdom, share it. How have you survived this long? Oh, an empire that's willing to do that will survive hardship. That's the interesting perspective here. And it's one most of us never get from reading this story, huh? Yeah, really pretty inspiring. Reading through, we're going to go through 20 through 24 and get to 28. So, and again, the meager, ugly cows, you know the story. They devour the healthy ones. We know this dream. And again, he says the ugly ones, all of that, they devour. The thin grain they devour. So verse 22, then I saw in my dream, behold, 7 grains. So he goes through the whole thing. And then we get to 25. Pharaoh's dream is one that God is doing to Pharaoh. And then you move through. He interprets the dream. We all know the interpretation, right? Verse 28. It is this matter that I have spoken to Pharaoh. God is about to do what God is about to do. He has shown Pharaoh. So the humility of Joseph is pretty interesting here. He was proud before, right? But captivity, again, has done something interesting for him. He understands there's judgment coming, there's pain, there's brokenness, but he's about to share something with humility, right? Joseph is able to, I love this quote, Joseph is able to speak with humility because he experienced captivity, right? Israel is much the same. We can thrive in captivity because we've learned to humbly live in peace even with our captors. And so again, Joseph comes to him humbly. And again, the idea here, when two empires, two tribes are willing to come together in humility, ask what's better for the greater good of everyone, right? You find this shalom happens, right? God with us. This idea is a really beautiful one. And so Egypt, again, can learn from Israel. Israel, you have been through it. You've been through captivity. You have found ways to live peace. You've done this in a humble way. Really pretty beautiful. Verse 29, behold, 7 years are coming, great plenty throughout the land of Egypt. Historically, I find this again very interesting, especially in the era, the time we're living, right? Every empire experiences a rise, right? There's years of plenty. There's years where we are number one, right? We're on top. The French have experienced this. The Romans experienced. The Greeks experienced this. America has experienced this, right? We have seen this over and over again. Empires, they build. There's plenty, right? People are not struggling for food, resources, all of these things. There's plenty. But as every empire, we know this historically, then there are those tight years, right? And we get this. There will be 7 years of famine, and they're going to rise. And after them, all the plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine will destroy the land. And the plenty will not be known because of that famine to follow, for it will be very severe. It made me remember in history. Some of the best historians, they say there are stages of history. One of my favorites, he says there are 7. Right? 7 years where these empires, as Pharaoh is scanning, he's asking the question, where am I? Where am I in these stages? Right? How long will my legacy last? How long until our nation crumbles, right? There's the age of the pioneers. This is the outburst, right? This is where they're scanning, they find that land looks good, let's go there, right? Oftentimes, let's be honest, most empires, most nations, they had to acquire that land, not because the land was empty. They had to acquire it through some kind of violent form, right? And that's just the reality. Like it, hate it, whatever. This is the reality of it. They take what is not theirs. It's what happens. We take resources. This is where war steps in. And so there is the age of the pioneer. And then, of course, we just mentioned the conquest, right? There is a conquest that happens. There's a militarization. They take, right? And then the next part, there's commerce. After they take, they begin trading. They begin building their empire by trading with others after they've established the military might. After that, we begin to move into affluence. They begin to gain power. Other nations take note that this power is rising, right? It's becoming the dominant force in that empire, in that era. And then next decade, intelligence, they begin creating things. There's a lot happening. Other nations will send over their best of the best, and they're developing, they're creating, they're building the wheel, a sewage system, all these things. You'll see Rome does this really well. After those years of intellect, we begin to move into decadence, right? And decadence was for Rome and Egypt, Babylon. Decadence was when they moved into complete entertainment, right? Everything revolved around entertaining, and they stopped producing goods. They stopped working on intellectually moving and shifting and changing. They were no longer the mecca, the thing, right? And so the place where good things happened, the best of the best. That's what happened. The decadence took over. And then after this, almost every historian will say this, there will be a decline and a collapse. And so the question, of course, a historian would ask, but also someone during that era, is what do we do when we go into decline, into collapse? And secondly, if I'm Israel, what happens to me, right, the smaller tribe, when my tribe is there under the influence of this empire that is going into decline and collapse, that is experiencing famine? What happens to us when that takes place? It's an interesting warning, right? Do you want that empire to collapse on top of you? Right? Interesting perspective if you're Israel reading this story. Verse 33, 34. So now let Pharaoh seek out an understanding and wise man and appoint him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this and appoint officials over the land and prepare the land of Egypt during the 7 years of plenty. Take time to prepare, right? Take time to prepare. I skipped through 35:50. It's a repetition. The same story is repeated, right? We move through that. Read it on your own. But again, the idea here, Israel is going to find a way to help Egypt prosper. That's the bigger picture here. So there are going to be years of plenty and there are going to be years of famine. And this is exactly what happened for Israel, right? And so Israel prospers as Egypt prospers, even in the decline, even in the empire beginning to fall. There's still a beautiful element of the two working together to create prosperity, to create a way in which their people can live in shalom. That's the idea. Israel is going to prosper in a foreign land. They're going to prosper out of affliction because they prepare, right? One of the quotes, I've seen this quote over and over again lately. Benjamin Disraeli, he says, he's quoted with this: "I am prepared for the worst, but hope for the best." And many of us have heard this before. Well, I prepare for the worst. I hope for the best, right? We say things like this often. He's the one that's actually coined with this. But as I've been thinking about this, 2 words stick out to me most, and I think of Israel. The 2 words: prepare, hope. Prepare, hope. I think it's fascinating because the two should work together, right? I find it fascinating. In America, we have these two different, we have the asses and the elephants. And really, boil it down very simplistically, and again, remove certain people from equations: hope and prepare. The two should go hand in hand. One is focused on the economics of the thing. The other is focused on the goodwill of the people. The two should probably go hand in hand. Prepare and hope. If you're only preparing, then you're simply trying to avoid something, right? You're forgetting the people. You're just simply in the headspace of just preparing. You've forgotten why you're preparing in the first place. You could prepare for something and completely forget why it is you're preparing and for whom you're preparing it for. Yeah, think again. Politically, religiously, it's all there, right? Prepare. You could become literally just reactionary living if prepare is the only thing you do. And that same kind of living isn't really living. But here's the other thing. Hope. You have to have hope. But if you're only hoping and not doing, if you're simply hoping and living for a future that you're not preparing for, then you will never experience that future. And so for Israel, the point is we have to prepare, but we also have to hope, right? Hope and prepare have to go hand in hand. We have to remember why we're doing this in the first place. And so, yes, in our culture today, we are experiencing some record inflation. Gas prices, food, we've seen this. We've even seen like some deflation. We'll see packages of things smaller but higher priced. Violent crimes in some of our biggest cities, they have more than doubled in some places. It's happening. I totally get it. And I know people are kind of jumping here and there. They're trying to read Revelation, pulling it out of context to make it say certain things. I get it, right? We've seen water shortages this summer. We've seen record high temperatures. Here in Idaho, we just had a record high summer of heat. It's happening, and some would argue that's global warming. Other would argue something else. But extreme divisiveness with leaders, right? Some of the language of the leaders lately, some of the speeches, it's very interesting, right? The question is very simple for me lately. How are people preparing? What can be and should be done? Should you go out and buy all the toilet paper from Costco? Well, I don't know, right? The idea here is deep, and it's one Israel was thinking: how do we prepare? And how do we hold on to hope? The Jewish culture, listen to this one. This is from Derek Flood. The Jewish culture walked a fine balance of hoping for better days while preparing for the pain and captivity of empire. They made provisions for the future walk the difficult path, allowing hope to fuel their journey. So do what you can to prepare, right? Prepare. Do what you can. If you think of certain things to prepare, that's beautiful. Buying extra beans, having difficult conversations with people you know you've been at odds with, those prepare. But allow hope to be the engine in preparing. That's such a beautiful idea that Israel is teasing out here. When Joseph shares the dream, it's fascinating to me. He's really sharing Jewish culture to him. He's telling Pharaoh, look how long we've survived, right? We have survived so long. And we've survived so long, Pharaoh, because we allowed hope to be our engine as we prepared for the worst. And because we allowed hope and preparedness to be our main guides in this, essentially wisdom, we've been able to be blessings to every empire we've ever been under. Yeah, so good. Verses 35 through 39. We moved through these before, right? But again, the idea here, Joseph, notice this in verse 40, and I wanted to bring this up, kind of moving back a little bit. Joseph, it's interesting here. Joseph, he gets a ring. Notice verse 42. Pharaoh's ring is put on Joseph. He gives him all this fine linen. He does all these things. I again find this interesting. After Joseph shares the secret, right? Israel's secret, prepare and hope, this beautiful secret. Literally, what happens here in the story, and again, did it really happen or not? Who knows, right? The bigger picture is when you share this wisdom with others, even your enemies, oftentimes you experience this elevated position. God elevates you and your enemies, right? Exodus 20:20, the Lord will fight for you. You need only be still. Share what you have, right? We see this all throughout the biblical narrative. Moses, Joseph, Jacob, Noah, Daniel. The message is simple, right? Prepare, hold on to hope, and God will elevate you. God will fight for you. God will speak for you. 2 Peter 1:10-11 says this, therefore, brethren, be even more diligent to make your call and election sure. For if you do these things, you will never stumble. For so an entrance will be supplied to you abundantly into the everlasting kingdom of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So again, the idea here, hold on to hope. Prepare, do everything you can, and when you do, you experience this elevated moment. Right? You experience freedom, captivity, even in the middle of famine. Even in the middle of captivity. This message, it's so cool to me. This message, Israel has decided they will even give the message of Torah, they will even give to their enemies. Even when their enemies don't fully understand it. Yeah, interesting. So again, removes the ring, does all of this. It's so, so good. Now, back to 55. When the entire land of Egypt hungered, the people cried out to Pharaoh for bread. But Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, go to Joseph. What he tells you, do. So again, heavy. This is why I question sometimes whether this literally happened or not, because here's the thing. A Pharaoh telling his people he cannot save them, but this native person, this person who essentially they have taken taken into captivity, this foreigner, he can. That's heavy, right? That is never done, right? And so again, highly unlikely in history of Egypt, very highly unlikely. But it's for Israel in the middle of captivity. That's the idea here. That's the message. Even the kings of this world will go to us for help in the middle of brokenness, right? Because the message is so strong. That's what they're reading, right? Our message has so much depth, so much beauty. We have overcome so many things as a people that nations will come to us because they understand we've been through it. And again, you want to talk to someone about hardship. You want to talk to someone about how to survive terrible things. Talk to a Jewish person who's gone through the Holocaust. There aren't many left now, right? They're just older, they're dying off. But you talk to someone, you listen to these Holocaust survivors. They've been through it. And yet, here's the thing, they prepared and they had hope as their engine. The Holocaust, Babylonian captivity would have been very similar in some ways, right? These people found a way to hold on to hope and yet prepare for the worst. They create Torah, they share it, they do everything they can to prepare, and then they hold on to hope that we will get through this in the end. Verse 15-7. And all the inhabitants of the land of the land came to Egypt, to Joseph, to purchase, for the famine had intensified in the entire land. So because of Joseph and his people, they became the storehouse for the nations. When the two communities came together for the greater good, they became a storehouse for the nations. What a beautiful picture, especially right now. Right? They become the storehouse. When this group in the church who hates rock music and this group in the church that just loves it, when they say, let's put aside our differences, let's stop arguing, and they come together and they say, we have an issue with people not getting enough food. When they come together and they put aside their differences, they work together, they become a storehouse for their community. And really, this is what churches were 50, 60, 70 years ago, right? They were the storehouses for the nations. They were the storehouses for the communities. They didn't just pull resources from, they actually gave resources out. And this is the beauty of what Israel's doing here. We share what we have. In difficult times, hold firm to faith, and the promise that God has given us will come true. Prepare, hold on to hope. The two images are so good. And I would argue right now, some very relevant stuff. So how do we take it home? I started thinking about this. Preparing for difficult times. Yes, we could go through I know there are all these preppers out there that are like buying lots of things and good on you, right? Fantastic. But that's not where we're going with this. So just so you know, I'm not going to tell you how to make water cisterns and how to get the most out of all of your rice and your bean preparation. I don't know. Don't go out and buy more toilet paper. Not the point. Here it is. Preparing for difficult times. How do we do this? Here are a couple things I've read this week that I thought were really good on a psychological, emotional level. So here we go. Number one, anticipate that tough times can be upsetting. It seems very simple, but we often know that when challenges, when they're coming, the anticipation of the event is going to be, it's going to be scary. And we're going to get a ton of a range of different emotions from it. And so it's normal to feel upset, worried when tough times are coming. Recognize it, anticipate it. I'm probably going to be freaking out. Anticipate it, right? Know that, okay, I have this really difficult conversation coming. It's going to be very, very conflicting. There's going to be a lot going on. Anticipate that you're going to be a little stressed. Prepare for it. Right? If you're someone on a very simple level, holistically, if you know you just overeat when you're stressed, prep your meals that week. Right? Eat something healthy, really healthy that week. Prep your body for it. Right? Anticipate that you're going to be stressed. Interesting, right? Number two, know that we have choices about how we respond. I love this one. Sometimes it feels better to avoid thinking about a situation, but this can mean we don't feel in control of our responses. And so that can cause us to feel stressed. So if we know that a difficult time's approaching, we can make a choice to prepare ourselves with thinking of, how do I respond? Right? How have I responded in the past that was good, positive responses? Right? And sometimes no response is the best response. So you have a choice. You can choose how you respond or not. Remember that in the middle of it. Number three, know ourselves and our typical reactions. This is so good. If you're someone that jumps to anger, remember that before you blow up on your best friend, right? Anticipate that response. And if you understand how you normally respond to stressful situations, you might just respond differently. Number four, remember our past. And this goes even deeper than number three. For Israel, they wrote Torah. right? For us, taking time to reflect on our past traumas, how we navigated them in the past, looking back on things like that, well, we made it, right? We made it. We did this and this to prepare, didn't we? And here's what we held on to for hope. Remember those things in the past, they will sustain us. And then lastly, do what we have control to do, right? If you have the opportunity to do something to control whatever outcome you see coming, do it, right? But there's some things that are not going to be within your control, right? Russia not giving us fertilizer in America. If you stress out too much over that, it's going to cause you to go crazy, right? You don't have control over that. What do you have control over? Plant a garden. It's going to help you be less stressed, right? Meet your neighbors, get to know each other. Those kind of things you have control over, right? If you know a really difficult conversation is going to happen soon, what do you have control over? Okay, I can start prepping by doing this and this and this, right? I can start talking to people, getting advice from people. You can do certain things beforehand to prepare. So whatever the thing is, think about how you might prepare to. Everyone, thank you so much for this. This was a really interesting conversation. I guarantee most of us have not thought about these themes, these ideas when we've read this section of the story. So as always, please consider going to ethos-church.org/donate. We are a tax-deductible organization, and we do a lot of work every week to make this happen. So please consider donating there. We would love to continue journeying with you. Ethos Living Rooms, we love doing these. We'd love to continue moving through, getting people more and more involved, connected all over the country. And as always, hit that subscribe button, share these videos with people. We want to grow this channel. When we get that full playlist of Genesis, it's going to be really fun to watch as people begin viewing it. I'm curious to see how quickly people try to get through the whole series. It's over a year, almost 2 years long now. So a really fascinating study over Genesis. Everyone, take care. I'll see you next week when we move into chapter 42. Love ya. Talk to you soon.